Welcome in. Belly up, have a seat, and grab a drink as we talk some Wingman Fantasy Football. Welcome into another edition of Wingman Fantasy Football, the League Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Furley, and as always, I'd like to thank all of you, or any of you who may be watching or listening to today's show. This is episode 68, Week 10 Rewind. And before we get any further along, let's make sure that everybody is in the room.
Wingmen assemble!
All right, guys, in this episode, we will be going over the game rewinds, the Goosometer, check in on our trade watch, and take a look at the updated standings. But before we do that, let's check in on the theme for Week 10. In Week 10, our themes were streamed kickers, as we had 4 kickers get picked up and started this week for a total of 55 points. So well done by managers. We'll get a little more into that during the rewinds. Also, another theme this week was the bonanza game of the week, the Detroit Lions at the LA Chargers, as we had 9 players equal over 193 points. 9 players for 193 points. That's 6 Lions equaled 108 points, and 3 LA Chargers equaled 84 points. And you know which team had most of those players, and if not, you'll find out in the rewind. All right, guys, let's check in on last week's games.
Let's go back! Week 10 Rewind.
All right, guys, let's take a look at last week's games. We're going to start with our first game on the slate. We had a battle of 2 teams at 6-3 with Michael's Amazing Spidey up against Katie's King George, and Amazing Spidey took this one, winning 120.36 to 64.02. Amazing Spidey has now won 2 games in a row, and I just want to make this point here because I know King George has been on near the top of the standings all year long, but she has had tons of injuries. She had her number 1 player out for 5 weeks, and she's still doing a great job. So I just want to commend her on her resilience and her perseverance through a tough season, and she gets the wins most of the time. But unfortunately, that trend has been changing recently, as she has now lost 3 in a row.
You're as cold as ice!
All right, let's check in on the top performers for Amazing Spidey's team this week. We had Kyler Murray, who was activated, had 19.26 points.
Welcome back.
All right, we had streaming kicker. This is one of our 4 kickers who were picked up in stream. Matt Prater was picked up on Sunday afternoon, and he scored 18 points for Amazing Spidey. Also, Christian McCaffrey had 17.2 points.
He's on fire!
Unfortunately for McCaffrey, he did not get in the end zone, so he is now still tied for the all-time consecutive games with a touchdown scored at 17. Despite Kyle Shanahan trying to give him the last drive to score, he could not do it, so he's going to be tied atop the record books for a little while. All right, also we have Jonathan Taylor, who had the early game in Germany, had 14 points.
He's heating up!
We had Josh Jacobs getting tons of work for the slow-moving Raiders. He had 13.7 points.
He's on fire!
And another streaming receiver, the tight end for the Buffalo Bills, Dalton Kincaid, had 13.6 points. And surprisingly enough, this is his 4th good game in a row. Also, Amazing Spidey had the Cleveland defense score 13 points.
He's heating up!
So for Amazing Spidey, he had 7 of 8 players make the top performers list, and all 8 players had double digits, as the only one to just miss this list was Devontae Adams at 11.6 points. Obviously, you could tell he had no duds with all the double-digit scores, but he did have some players on his bench who actually did a little better than his starters, as Brock Purdy had 23.84 points on the bench.
He's heating up!
George Kittle had 19.2 points on the bench.
He's heating up!
And Javonte Williams had 19 points on the bench.
He's heating up!
All right, as for Katie's King George, she only had 1 player who made her top performers list, and that was Garrett Wilson at 13.8 points. And for her duds, she had Senor Muy Bien, Travis Etienne, go no bueno as he only had 5.4 points this week. And Deontay Johnson only had 2.2 points. As for some bench players that did well for Katie's King George, the rookie sensation, CJ Superstar, had 25.04 points on the bench.
He's heating up.
And Brian Robinson, Commanders running back, has been solid all year long. He had 24.7 points on the bench.
He's heating up.
And Quentin Johnston finally got in the end zone, and he had 11.4 points on the bench. On to our next game. We have Knicks waddle away up against Jimerson's Red Sox Nation. And in this one, we had an upset.
Average Joe's wins in a shocking upset.
I feel shocked.
Knicks waddle away defeated Red Sox Nation 94.66 to 82.88. Both these teams were on a bye week crunch as Waddle-Way had 5 players on bye and Red Sox Nation had 4 players on bye. And this is now 2 losses in a row for Red Sox Nation. All right, let's check in on the top performers for Waddle-Away as he had Dak Prescott get 39.86 points. This is his 4th game in a row of over 24 points. Also, he had Cortland Sutton had 15.3 points and an amazing catch on the side of the end zone to start the scoring for the Broncos on Monday night. As for his duds, he had Tony Pollard to get only 5.5 points, and Mark Andrews had 5.4 points. There was no one on the bench that could have helped Waddle away, and he made it through the week without any major injuries. All right, let's check in on Red Sox Nation's scorers. He had Joe Burrow get 23.88 points.
He's on fire.
James Cook of the Buffalo Bills had 13 points. He was doing well anytime he wasn't fumbling, and the Dallas defense had double digits once again, getting 10 points. As for his duds this week, he had Terry McLaurin get only 5.3 points, and Rashid Shaheed only had 4.9 points. He did have one player on his bench, although he wouldn't have helped, as Jordan Love had 20.66 points on the bench, and Jimerson's Red Sox Nation made it through the week without any major injuries. On to our third game of the slate. We have Ken's Tompa Brady up against Bernie's Team B.
I'm Cuban B. Yes, Cuban B.
And this was a butt whooping as Tompa Brady scored 151.12 points to Team B's 48.56 points. This was the highest score of the week for Tompa Brady and the 3rd highest score of the season. And I thought that in week 4, our 95-point win by Cubert's Rage would have been the biggest blowout of the year, but it was not, as it was bested this week as Tompa Brady blew out Team B's team by over 102 points. My, what a blowout. As for Team B, unfortunately, he now has 6 losses in a row.
You're as cold as ice.
And this was the lowest score of the week and the lowest score of the year. All right, let's check in on the top performers for Tompa Brady, and he had many, as he had Keenan Allen score 35 points. That was part of that Chargers-Lions bonanza. Justin Herbert scored 30.42 points. Jason Myers, a streaming kicker from the Seattle Seahawks, had 21 points, so this was the best streaming pickup of the week. Jamar Chase, despite being banged up going into the week, finished with a very strong game, getting 20.9 points. And Chris Olave scored again, getting 18.4 points.
He's heating up.
And Najee Harris had another strong game at 17.1 points.
He's heating up.
As for Tompa Brady's duds, he had Marquise Hollywood Brown only get 3.3 points. And on his bench, he had another strong performance from Josh Dobbs, the Jostronaut, as he had 25.12 points.
He's heating up.
Unfortunately, he did have an injury as Keenan Allen injured his shoulder.
Oh, no.
But Keenan Allen was able to return in the game and continue putting up stats. We just want to monitor his shoulder going into week 11. All right, there's not much to check in here on Team B, but let's check in on his players. As he had a top score of Kenneth Walker, Texas Ranger, get 19.2 points. And unfortunately, he had 4 duds this week, as Will Levis, the Banana Man, had 7.96 points. DeAndre Hopkins had only 4.2 points. Calvin Risky back on the dud list at 3 point even. And Zach Moss had 1 carry for 2 yards, getting 2 points for the virtual Goose. There were some players on his bench that did better than his starters, as Baker Mayfield had 20.32 points on the bench, and rookie running back Keaton Mitchell for the Baltimore Ravens had 13.1 points on the bench. The only good news for Team B is that he made it through the week without any major injuries, although the way his team's going, I bet he wishes most of his players were just hurt. On to the fourth game in our docket, we have Paul's Cubert Rage up against Alex's They Took Our Jobs. And this was a strong showing here as Cubert's Rage defeated They Took Our Jobs 110.28 to 98.32. Let's see. This game actually got a lot closer than it looked like it was going to be, and it took a late rushing touchdown from Josh Allen to seal the deal on Monday night, as Alex's They Took Our Jobs was having a glimmer of hope towards the end of this game, but Paul's Cubert Rage pulled this one out. All right, let's check in on the scoring for Cubert's Rage. He had Mike Evans score 23.3 points, and Josh Allen is back chugging along as he had 20.38 points. David Montgomery, part of the bonanza for the Lions, made his return this week.
Welcome back.
And he had 17.6 points. And the surprising train, the engineer, Rashad White, had 16.8 points, and he keeps chugging along. He also had DK Metcalf, who went into the week banged up, but did have a fine game at 13.3 points. And the Baltimore defense had double digits once again, getting 12 points.
He's heating up.
As for his duds, he had a pair of Bills underperform as Stephon Diggs scored only 4.9 points, and Tyler Bass had only 2 points. And once again, no matter who Cubert's Rage would have played, he would have had a fine game as he had just as many strong players on his bench as he did in his lineup. Let's start with Sam Howell, who had 26.18 points.
He's on fire.
TJ Hawkinson had 24.9 points, another player going into this week who is questionable due to injury, but had a monster performance. He's not heating up or on fire, but he has had 4 straight games of 10-plus points. He also had Jalen Warren get 18 points.
He's heating up.
And Tank Dell had 15.9 points on the bench.
He's heating up.
He did have one injury as Alexander Madison left the game early with a concussion.
Oh, no.
We'll see if he's able to make it back this week, but most players who get in the concussion protocol do miss a minimum of 1 week. The only person I can think who didn't miss any time was Brock Purdy. All right, let's check in on They Took Our Jobs scores as he had. Pardon me, do you have any great Bijan?
Pardon me, would you have any Grey Poupon?
As Bijan Robinson finally returned to the top score list, getting 17.1 points. And Alvin Kamara, after one slow week, got back on track with a 15-point game. And another streaming kicker, Riley Patterson, had 12 points.
He's heating up.
As for his duds, he had Jacoby Myers, Raiders receiver, get only 3.1 points. For They Took Our Jobs, he had no one on his bench who could have helped out, and he made it through the week without any major injuries. All right, guys, on to our 5th and last game. And like I said, going in, this was going to be the biggest game of the week as our 2 hottest teams, Reggie's Lionized was up against Corey's Mac Daddy 2s, and they both had winning streaks coming into this one, as Lionized had a 4-game winning streak and Mac Daddy 2s had a 3-game winning streak. However, Lionized was able to pull this one out with a score of 134.82 to 120.96. This was our highest scoring loser of the week for Mac Daddy 2s and the highest scoring loser of the year.
It's all there, black and white, clear as crystal. You get nothing. You lose. Good day, sir.
Lionized had 7 players make his top performer list, and if he didn't put in his streaming kicker of Groupie for the Saints and kept Dustin Hopkins, he would have had even more points, and all of his players, all 8, would have made the top performers list. For Lionized, he has now won 5 games in a row, and he is still rolling. All right, let's check in on his top performers. As you already know, the Sun God, Amon-Ra St. Brown, had 26.5 points, part of the Detroit LA Chargers bonanza. And I have to keep mentioning this, that every game this year Amon-Ra St. Brown has played, he has been in the top performer list. He has been the most consistent player in all of fantasy football. And his teammate, Jahmyr Gibbs, for the third straight time at over 24 points, and he is on fire.
He's on fire.
Jared Goff, another Lion, made this list at 21.32 points. Austin Eckler had 19.5 points.
He's on fire.
Christian Kirk had 13.4 points. The San Francisco defense had 13 points, and Michael Pittman had 12.4. Now, for Michael Pittman, this is his 5th game in a row with over 10 points. Just to do the math here, Lionized's 3 Lions combined for 72.52 points. Let's see here. And it's clear that right now, Lionized season is truly turned around. All right, let's check in on the bench scores for Lionized. Had no duds this week, obviously, with all those big-time scores, and he still had some strong players on his bench, as Dustin Hopkins had 14.0 points on the bench, and Brandon Ayuk
Hadouken.
had 13 points on the bench. Unfortunately, it wasn't reported until today, but he had a major injury this week, as Deshaun Watson is now out for the year with shoulder surgery.
Oh, no.
He hasn't played him yet, and he's been solid on his bench. But luckily, not to make fun of this here, but he did. I'm going to say this was a Bernie sabotage. All right, let's check in over here on Corey's Mac Daddy's 2 team. This snapped his 3-game winning streak, and he too had plenty of top performers with a 120-point game this week, as CeeDee Lamb keeps chugging along, and he's the highest scoring fantasy player over the last 5 weeks, having 34 points even. Geno Smith rebounded from last week's dud as he contributed 24.06 points. And Deontay Foreman, the player he picked up just before his Thursday night start, had 16.2 points. And Deebo Samuel is back.
Who? Debo.
Deebo had 13.9 points.
Welcome back.
And his kicker, Evan McPherson, had 11 points. Mac Daddy 2's had no duds this week. Did have a couple players on his bench who had strong days, as Tyler Lockett had 19.2 points and Jerome Ford had 11.4 points. As for his injuries, I made a mistake on the Week 10 ins and outs, saying Michael Thomas was not going to play, but maybe I knew something was coming, as he did play but left the game early with an injury, and they have a bye next week, but he's expected to miss a couple of weeks.
Oh, no.
All right, guys. With that being said, all the games are in the books. Let's check in on our Goose-O-meter.
I'm just goosing along.
All right, guys. We had no added gooses this week, as we are still at 7. All right, guys. Let's get rid of that. Okay, let's check in on our trade watch. Buy, sell.
Weekend Fantasy Football Trade Watch.
All right, this one is going to be a little more in-depth this time, as we have more games to choose from here. All right, let's start with a simple way to look at this. So a week and a half ago, we had Amazing Spidey trade with Red Sox Nation, as Amazing Spidey sent out Devontae Williams in exchange for Raheem Mostert. And through 2 games, Devontae Adams has scored 5.4 points and 11.6 points. Both of those games, he was in the starting lineup, so he has 17 points since joining Amazing Spidey, as an average of 8.5 points in his lineup. While Raheem Mostert was on bye this week, he scored 14.5 points last week, and he averages 14.5 points per start. So per start, Red Sox Nation has a 6-point advantage in this deal so far. On to our next trade, which was Amazing Spidey sent out Justin Herbert and received Derrick Henry from Tompa Brady. I'm going to remove the secondary players from this, as Dameon Pierce has not played at all, and Amazing Spidey at the moment has dropped Tajay Spears. So let's just check in on our 2 players that are left on our team and playing. So Derrick Henry has scored 17.7 points and 2.9 points for a total of 20.6 points. However, he was only started in one of those games, his good game, so his average starting score is 17.7 points. As for Justin Herbert, who's been down and up, he had 7.14 points in the first game and 30.42 points in the second game, for a total of 37.56 points. So his average score per start is at 18.78 points. So Tompa Brady now has a 1-point advantage per start. against Amazing Spidey. So Amazing Spidey is actually losing in both these trades if you look at it in that lens. All right, now we're going to check in on the what if portion of our trade watch. All right, so in our first, we'll start with Amazing Spidey. So the first game with the trade, that was week 9, he started Derrick Henry and Devontae Adams for a total of 23.1 points instead of his projected starting lineup of Raheem Mostert and Puka Nacua, who would have scored 19.2 points. So in week 1, in that trade, he was up by 3.9 points, but it did not affect his outcome as he won by 27. So that 3.9 points was insignificant. In his week 2, with the buys, there were a lot of different players going on here. So his new lineup had Devontae Adams, Jonathan Taylor, and Kyler Murray. And his old lineup would have had George Kittle, Jonathan Taylor, and Justin Herbert. So let's compare these two scenarios. In his new lineup of Adams, Taylor, and Murray, those three scored 44.86 points. If he did not make the trade, however, and played the projected lineup of Kittle, Taylor, and Herbert, he would have scored 63.52 points. So in week 2, Amazing Spidey was down 18.66 points. Again, he won by over 56 points, so it didn't change the outcome. And his overall differential through the 2 weeks, Amazing Spidey is minus 14.76 points, but his win-loss record is the same at 2-0. Let's check in on Red Sox Nation. Again, in his first week, he had played Raheem Mostert instead of the traded for Devontae Adams, and that was a 9.1 plus move for Red Sox Nation. In week 2 of this trade, he had Mostert on bye, so he played McLaurin and James Cook in for Mostert, and those two players combined for 18.3 points, while his old lineup would have been Devontae Adams and James Cook, and those guys would have scored 24.6 points. So in week 2, he was down negative 6.3 points. Again, did not change his outcome as he lost by 11. It would have made it a lot closer, but he still would have lost. So through 2 weeks, Red Sox Nation is up 3.8 points overall, and his record is unchanged at 0-2 during that span. On to our third team involved in these trades. In week 1 of the trade, which is week 9 of the NFL season, Tompa Brady's new lineup was Justin Herbert and his streaming running back Gus Edwards, and combined those two guys had 24.34 points against his projected lineup if he did not make the trade. Again, I gave him Tyson Bagent in this scenario and Derrick Henry. Those two guys had 41.5 points. So in week 1, he lost 17.16 points, but again, he lost by 19 points. So his outcome would have been way closer, but it still would have been a loss. Again, these are some, assumptions and projections here. But in his second week, things turned around a lot as he was able to play Justin Herbert, and he put in Najee Harris this time, and those two guys scored 47.52 points, as opposed to if he kept Derrick Henry and did not have Herbert, he probably would have played Josh Dobbs after his strong games, and I think he would have stuck with Derrick Henry, and those guys had 28.02 points. So this week, he had a 19.5 point boost. But of course, he won by over 102 points. So those 19 points, again, were pretty insignificant in the outcome. So his overall scoring differential with the 2 weeks of this trades, he's positive now at plus 2.34 points. But his record is the same at 1-1. So despite Amazing Spidey having the worst differential, he's still 2-0. And despite Red Sox Nation have the best differential, he's still 0-2. And Tompa Brady's right in the middle, and he's 1-1. All right, guys, let's check in on the updated standings. All right, we didn't have much movement, and we did have some movement here. As the top 2 teams both won, but teams 3, 4, 5, and 6 all lost. So now we have Amazing Spidey is still in first place, and we have Cubert's Rage is in second place. They are both at 7-3. In third place is still King George, but she's dropped down to 6-4. In fourth place is Red Sox Nation, who dropped to 5-5, and he's in a 4-way tie for fourth place between Red Sox Nation, Tompa Brady, They Took Our Jobs, and Lionized are all 5-5, and Red Sox Nation is the only team over 1,000 points among these 4. We have falling into 8th place is Mac Daddy 2's at 4-6. 9th place is Waddle Away at 4-6, and Team B is at 2-8. The good thing for Team B here is that everyone that was in third place or lower all lost. Or the teams are between third and fifth place all lost. So he didn't lose any ground on the playoffs, but now he really does have to win every game. And I'm not sure if it's possible with who plays who left. If there's enough teams going to be down to 6 wins, but he needs to win every game. Next loss, and he'll be eliminated. And Lionized is 3-0 in the division. He has guaranteed himself no worse than a tie for the best division record in the even division. He has 2 games back with Amazing Spidey. Still has Amazing Spidey on his schedule. So if he can win one more game than Amazing Spidey before that Week 14 matchup, he will have his destiny in his own hands. After starting 0-5, Lionized is surging and is 5-5 and just points out of the playoffs. He is now tied for the last playoff spot. Congratulations for not giving up there, Reggie. That is amazing turnaround. Don't forget, guys, please leave your comments on any of our Wingman Entertainment pages or YouTube so we can get you into our next mailbag segment. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, TuneIn Radio. Now we're on Google Podcasts. Just search Wingman the League on all those podcast platforms to find our content. If you want video forms of our content, you go to wingmanentertainment.net/WFF or /podcasts. Also, you go ahead and find us on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/@wingmanfantasyfootball. With that being said, guys, thank you so much for watching another episode of Wingman Fantasy Football, the League podcast. And may your glasses be full, your mugs stay frosty, and we will see you next time.